Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Inner West Council meeting for June. And I would like to acknowledge we're meeting on the land of Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respect to Aboriginal elders past and present. I just want to bring to people's attention that we do live stream council meetings in the spirit of open, accessible, transparent government. Camera is focused on the front of the chamber, not on speakers or the public. However, by speaking at a council meeting, members of the public agree to being recorded and must ensure their speech to council is respectful and uses appropriate language. A person who uses defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language may be exposed to liability for which council takes no responsibility. Any part of the meeting held in closed session will not be streamed but will be recorded for the purpose of verifying the accuracy of the minutes. There are no items to be considered in closed session tonight. In terms of declarations of interest, I do need to declare in relation to item 7, which is changes to outdoor advertising planning rules, that I have a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest in that. I did some consulting for RMS 2 years ago on this matter, well, on a related matter on the issue of outdoor advertising. It's a non-pecuniary, non-significant conflict which I declare on that item. I do move and declare carried the minutes of the previous meeting held in May, and I do also note that the meeting is going to be governed by the Code of Meeting Practice of the former Leichhardt Council, as has been the case since I came into this role and as will be the case until I complete this role. In terms of speaking from the public, the Code of Meeting Practice does actively encourage open council meeting. Members of the public can speak for up to 3 minutes on items listed on the agenda. We have conducted a voluntary registration system for tonight. We do have quite a few people who've registered to speak. Those people who've registered will be given priority in the speaking order when the agenda item is discussed, and then if there are other speakers who wish to speak on the item, they may do so. So we need to move now to first item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the Implementation Advisory Group and Local Representation Advisory Committee held on the 13th of June. I do actually have one registered speaker, which is Chris Eleanor. Chris, if you're here, if you could come forward and address council.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I've read the minutes of this meeting. I note that when the matter of the community organiser was brought before this council at the last council meeting, you said that you were going to consult with the members on the Local Representation Advisory Committee. I see no reference to that in the minutes. Could you please advise whether the matter was discussed with them and what the results of those discussions were?
Was that the only issue you were going to raise, Chris?
Indeed.
Okay, thanks. So that item has not yet been discussed with the Local Representation Advisory Committee. It will be discussed with them at the July meeting. I did want to wait and see how we went with the City of Sydney in terms of their funding request. They have indicated that they would, if council was going to fund the position, they would be prepared to 50% fund it. That was agreed at the City Council's meeting last night, I believe. So that is a matter we will discuss at the July LRAC. But I have also made it clear that I do believe it appropriate that any final decision on that matter be made by the elected council, not by me. So there will be a discussion, but any final decision to adopt and to continue the funding of that community organiser will be made by the elected council.
This probably leaves us in a lacuna in terms of the employment of the community organiser, given that it's not likely, given the amount of business that will be up in front of the first meeting of the newly elected committee, the matter might not even get on the agenda. So my submission to you would be that we're seeking some interim funding here.
Chris, I'll consider that, but that's all I'm going to do tonight. So okay. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thanks. If there are any other speakers on this item, yes, John Stamoulis.
Thank you. I refer to the item WestConnex update report M4M5 concept link design. An amendment was lost on the evening, the Stamoulis-Cassidy amendment, that sought to, or that asked council to inform the community about the current status of the WestConnex project. I would like that reviewed this evening because I believe that it's very important that this single biggest project affecting one end of the municipality to the other needs further information to be provided to the community. In my door knocking for the local council election, repeatedly I've been asked for information about the project. Some people are finding that with the various threads of this project that it's complex to understand all parts of it. So I would ask again that council take its leadership role here and inform its community about this project. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'll come to that. Did anyone else want to speak on item 1, the minutes of the Local Representation Committee? No? Okay. Sorry? Okay. Come forward.
No WestConnex public transport. I'm a bit puzzled, Mr. Pearson, because it's my understanding that at last night's City of Sydney Council meeting, Mayor Clover Moore did agree to funding $50,000 towards the position of the community organiser. Is that correct? But as I understood that, it would be contingent on payment forthcoming from this council. And yet you seem to be saying you will not make that decision because you won't be in power at the time that the funding would kick in. So I'd ask the question, how do we win here? Why cannot you make a decision to fund us, for example, for 6 months or 3 months to tide us over when the current funding expires? Are you not making decisions on other budgetary matters before you leave office that will carry forward into the next financial year? And if that is the case, if the argument is that you won't be here to implement decisions that impact on the next financial year, how is the logic to follow if you can do it for some items but not for this? I am puzzled.
Was that the only item you wanted to raise?
Well, yes, but it is a significant one. And really, in relation to what Mr. Stamoulis is saying, you know very well that we are looking down the barrel of the release of the EIS for the M4, M5 design. That design is going to have a shocking impact on the entire Inner West, and the people who are going to be subjected. One more minute, please. Need to be informed, and I think you are aware that our community organiser is working across the groups. I think you know his work and his predecessors' work. He's working for all of the Inner West groups to try and help people to become aware of what the impacts are. So I ask you to think again, Mr. Pearson, about interim funding, despite what some former councillors might be telling you. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. So just 1 second, Julie. I'll respond to 2 things. One is John Stamoulis, the request for community information regarding stage 3 of WestConnex. Council is preparing a flyer to the community on stage 3 of WestConnex, and I think that is actually a better mechanism than the Inner West Courier, to be honest. Whilst that is circulated widely, I think a specific flyer will probably have greater impact. So that work is underway. In regard to Adrian Schilling's point, I have made it clear that I don't want to commit the incoming council to a full 12 months funding of the community organiser position, because that is more appropriately made by the incoming council. My understanding is the funding is, and I'll seek advice from the financial people, but or Kendall perhaps, my understanding is the position is funded up until September this year sometime, if we need to top it up for a month or two, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not going to fund it for the full 12 months because that's more appropriately dealt with by the incoming council. But I will request clarification on when it is actually funded until Pab or Kendall.
Yeah, through the administrator, it is till the end of September, so we've got funding till then.
Right, so that means, sorry, if you turn your mic off, Pam, that means that the incoming council will have an opportunity at that meeting in September to consider extending the funding.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, well, I will just make sure that it's not left high and dry until the new council makes a decision on it. So we'll just look at whether there's a need to top it up in October, but that's as far as I would go on it. Julie Passos.
Yes, I was going to leave it to the next item, but now that you're talking about funding, I have a concern I'd like to raise, if I may. I would like, would you know off the top of your head, is that funding that you have been given to certain groups, does it cover the WestConnex action group? Have they received funding from the council?
I'm going to let you say whatever you want to say and then I'll respond to the issues rather than question and answer, Julie. So,
okay, fair enough. Well, here I have that we've got the founder of the WestConnex action group is standing as a candidate in the upcoming election. And if they've received funding from the council, as a Liberal hoping to be pre-selected, I want some money from the council too to run my campaign. No, well, I'd like an answer to that, because if this person that founded this group has received funding from the ratepayers, I don't think it's right that you as administrator have doled out funding to a potential candidate. And if they did receive funding, we need some answers and to what's left, and is any of the funding going to be used for her campaign?
Julie, once you've finished, I'll respond to that.
I'm finished.
Okay, thanks. So you could resume your seat if you would.
Thank you.
So the position that's been funded, and again, Kendall can clarify, is a community organiser across the groups that operate in the Inner West. It is not to any particular political candidate. It is to I'm not sure of the name of the person who's doing the job currently, but his role is to coordinate the input of the very many anti-WestConnex groups that exist in the Inner West local government area. So he and before him, another lady have performed a useful function of being able to bring to council a more unified position in relation to the community group's views on WestConnex. It is not funding that's allocated to a specific individual. It's allocated to a position. And I think it's auspiced through the Nature Conservation Council or some such body. Kendall, can you clarify that, please?
Yeah, that's right. It uses the facilities of the Nature Conservation Council, but the position is wholly funded by council. So, yeah, and as you correctly say, it's not aligned to any one group. It works right across the groups.
So, Julie, I can't have a question and answer on this. We've got 22 items on the agenda. So, well. Sorry, just yeah. Okay, Julie. Well, I'm sure you can raise that when we come to the WestConnex item, but you've had an answer, and I think it's a clear answer on that. Okay. Well, that's what it is, Julie. So, thank you. Anybody else who wants to speak? Yes, John Lozano. Order, please. This is a council meeting. Can you please just allow the speaker to speak?
My rage started the day our councils were forced to be amalgamated and the unelected administrator appointed by Mike Baird. And when I learned that the WestConnex route fitted perfectly within the new boundaries, my resolve to speak out was cemented. I've been coming here to this chamber ever since. There has been much discussion over Council's funding for the community worker. For those not familiar, it is a position to provide assistance to community groups standing up against WestConnex when others who should have not, or have not been permitted by their minders. It's an invaluable resource to these groups, given all the members are volunteers and most have full-time jobs. All the community groups have made representations, and the overwhelming message to the council was, please continue funding. The position is funded 50% by the City of Sydney, by the way. I've worked with these community groups several times, speaking at community events, and I've had the privilege to even represent one of them at the New South Wales Senate inquiry into tolling. None of these groups have ever shied away from calling out a politician, irrespective of the party, if their policy will have an impact on our community. There were 2 lone dissenters until tonight at the last council meeting who spoke up against the funding position, both former councillors. And the reasons, although veiled, seem to be that there is a connection with the current worker and a political party, obviously not one of their own. These are not the type of individuals that I want the interests of my community entrusted to. I was at the City of Sydney Council meeting last night, and they did vote in favour of supporting the position. Even Linda Scott, a Labor councillor, voted in favour. I asked the council that 1 or 2 months extended funding is not enough. We really need something like 6 months so the new council can assess the merits of the position to the community in its own merits, away from the political ideology that we're experiencing here tonight. There's far too much ideology experienced in our country, and the character traits of the politicians in Canberra or Macquarie Street are just not welcome or needed in the new council. I've read recently that there is a belief that the new boundaries will favour the major parties. Perhaps. After all, there's been much, there must have been a reason why the former major party councillors voted in unison to not oppose the amalgamation. I'm concerned at the prospect of this bipartisan approach coming back in September. But I'm an optimist. I think that the sentiment against the established political parties sweeping the world may be stirring through our streets. There are 2 non-aligned independents already have stepped forward, John Stamoulis in Balmain and Pauline Lockie in Stanmore. And if the antics we're witnessing here tonight, I thoroughly welcome more of this. As I said, I've been visiting these chambers for 1 minute, please. As I said, I have been visiting these chambers for over 1 year, voicing my concerns about the inadequacy of council's actions, calling for transparency when none existed, and trying desperately to induce some passion in yourself for our causes. I'm prepared to continue once the new council starts, if they display the same general ineptitude across matters of critical importance to our community. But I've made a choice to be more proactive and try to get these things happening from the start, as opposed to seeking answers afterwards. I'm choosing to also stand as an independent councillor in my own ward of Leichhardt. And if the Murdoch papers are right and independents have little chance, then so be it. But the people would have spoken. However, I'll have solace in the fact that the community will be much more informed, and the expectations of the new council will be much, much higher had I not campaigned. Irrespective of the outcome, rest assured I'll be back here in September asking the same question I've been asking for quite a while. Whatever happened to that land in Reg-Coded Reserve that was let go for only $3,000 to the Sydney Motorways Corporation? Hopefully I'll get an answer tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So Kendall, can you update on the Reg Cody matter?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've received advice from our legal counsel that negotiations are still underway. A price has been offered, but that is being negotiated. There is a hearing set, but hopefully the price can be agreed before it needs to go to hearing. So yes, it's still in train, and as soon as we can disclose that there is an agreement, we'll certainly feed that information through our normal information channels.
So was anybody else going to speak on item 1? We haven't actually even got to the WestConnex item yet. This people may not quite have realised that, although I feel like we have. At the moment, all I'm doing is noting the minutes of the IAG and LRAC from June, but So if nobody wants to speak, I will do that, note those minutes and move to the WestConnex item, where I'm sure we'll have further discussion about WestConnex. So I've got people listed, registered to speak on this item, and I'll take it in order of listing. So I've got Chris Eleanor again. Chris, have you already raised the issue you wanted to raise?
I have now, but I don't want to get speak.
Okay. Cynthia Moore?
Thank you, Administrator. I'd just like to talk to the Council about the DisConnex Reframing Resistance exhibition at the Precinct Gallery that begins tomorrow on the 28th of June. Despite the determined efforts of local groups to call attention to the serious long-term problems that WestConnex would cause and to halt the project, Ashfield and Haberfield were among the first communities to face the bulldozers. Many of the artworks and other items in DisConnex Reframing Resistance exhibition at the Christie Cotter Gallery relate directly to homes that were destroyed. Is that better? Relate directly to homes that were destroyed in these suburbs by repurposing salvaged heritage items or recording and commenting on the losses. Some of the key contributors and organisers never saw themselves as artists until they were moved to express in a creative way their responses to the unnecessary and costly destruction of their homes, streets and parks. We hope that people will understand from the exhibition that standing up for humane values is worthwhile and rewarding, even if you don't win the first battle. I think viewers at this exhibition will understand this from the richness of the objects and stories. Organising and staging this exhibition has only been possible because of a dedicated group of volunteers who have given their time and expertise to the project. The organising team would appreciate a contribution from Council towards the costs of putting on this exhibition, namely for the transportation of exhibits and printing of the catalogue and flyers. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Julie Passos, you're next on my list, or you?
No, for the West, I've already spoken.
Okay, sure.
The reason I spoke first was because funding was brought up.
Sure, yep, no problem. So they were the people I had registered to speak. I've got Lucille McKenna. Yep. And then Victor Macri.
Mr. Pearson, I'm probably somewhat out of order, but I'd like to speak on a matter and inform the Council that Ray Jones died this afternoon. Ray is a former mayor of this council, and I would ask that at the next meeting of council that there's a formal condolence motion, but I thought it was appropriate to inform the council tonight and maybe organise something for his wife Helen and Elise and Bevan, the two children who we all knew very well. Of course, a former mayor of Ashfield Council, not of this council. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lucille. And yes, I knew Ray Jones. His kids played cricket with my kids. So, yeah, I didn't know that. So we will certainly do both those things. Thanks for bringing that up, and commiserations to the family. Julie? Yeah, but we are effectively talking about WestConnex. So if you're quick, Julie, I can't turn it into a
An opponent of mine and a long-term councillor that fought hard for Summer Hill. I would have to say, out of all the Labor people I've come across in the inner west, he would have to have been a true gentleman, very fair and a very caring person. I heard he was sick, and I can honestly say I'm absolutely shocked that he passed away, and Summerhill's going to lose out because he fought a lot of issues in Summerhill, even though I was opposed to a lot of them. He was sincere in his fights for the betterment of Summerhill and Ashfield. And I agree with Mrs. McKenna. I really do hope you send our condolences, and maybe my name too, not just as a collective, because I don't really think Helen would expect anything from me, a Liberal, but I really would like her to know that I'm thinking of her at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So we will do both those things. Thanks for bringing that to Council's attention. Victor Macri.
Thanks, Chair. I think now people that look around the area will realise that the WestConnex is actually rolling out and happening. And I think it's really incumbent on council to start to shift part of its focus on the long-term impacts to the residents that do live around the WestConnex. And what I'm asking for is for council to basically engage an independent body or council itself to undertake air quality testing at all the proposed stack sites, because we need data now that is accessible to all the public for them to be able to see what the air quality is now. And we need to know, once these stacks are operational, if it changes. I mean, there is a real sense of distrust and confusion with the way the state government has handled this WestConnex. There's a lot of people that are upset in how they've handled it. And I think that we really should be protecting our residents and giving them access to the data. The state government is undertaking air quality testing, but is not releasing any of that data to the public. And that's the important things. People need to be reassured. For myself personally, I don't think we should be building these roads without filtered stacks. I just think that that's a crime. I think that's a crime on many levels. The first level is that you have an opportunity here to actually do something positive. And the thing is, we could never catch and filter the air from vehicles on Liverpool Road because it disperses too quickly. But there you have all these cars that are using, and you have all this pollution there. You'd actually make the place better. It'll be a better place. The WestConnex could turn into some sort of positive, that it could be providing cleaner air in our environment. Also, I would struggle to find anyone that say, if they put an extra 10 cents or 5 cents on the toll to pay for that filtering, I, for one, don't think there's anyone that would actually say, no, we won't pay that because we don't want better air quality. I just think it's incumbent for us to help our residents and protect them, because if that data they're collecting isn't actually public and there is a real lack of trust in the actual community with the WestConnex, I just think we should be sticking up for them and letting them know what's really going on. And I'm hoping that you'll accept that, and if it's another body that does the testing, but an independent body and real online, not dissimilar from what's been done down at the passenger ships down in Balmain down there. You know, the EPA is doing that, and that's all publicly available so people can know and monitor. This is sort of real information we need. And then if there needs to be a class action because the government has lied to us that the air quality isn't that, what government wants to poison their people? I mean, it's absurd. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other speakers on this item? So John Stamoulis and then Chris Eleanor.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. When I arrived from Adelaide in 1980, about Parramatta being Sydney's second CBD, creating multitude of jobs for people in the western suburbs so they wouldn't have to travel 1.5 to 2 hours each way. and they'd spend more time with their families, there'd be quality jobs out there. Well, that certainly hasn't happened in the last 34 years. In fact, what are we doing? We're spending $17 billion so they can travel 1.5 hours each way with no jobs growth in Parramatta and paying tolls for it. So WestConnex, I think, is probably... Thank you. I think WestConnex is a step back to the 1980s for those who are old enough to understand the mood of the times then. But two things that I will quickly ask for is, number one, throughout the stages of discussion, we've always discussed whether or not council will be supporting extension of the light rail into the Bays precinct area. I'm wondering whether that question can be answered and whereabouts we may have documented that and presented that on behalf of our community. And the second thing is, if council could briefly outline what the nature of the traffic studies would be, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do that at the end of this session, John. Chris, I thought you were coming forward.
I live across the road from where they're putting in WestConnex. Over the last 6 months or so, I've been working in my carport when the sounds of the demolition and the rebuilding that's been going on to actually refurbish a lot of the items that have been salvaged from WestConnex. These are heritage items. These are items which would have gone to the demolishers and would have been sold off if we hadn't intervened to get hold of some of these items. So what we've done with these items now is to put them in an exhibition. Okay, these are beautiful stained glass windows and fireplaces and so on and so forth. Pictures of the sort of protest action that we've been taking over the last couple of years. So all I want to do is to declare a personal interest in this this exhibition and to commend the $750, which is not a lot of money, to you, and for the $300 for the Newtown residents against WestConnex. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Other speakers on item 2? John Lozano.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I welcome the comments from Victor, was it? Speaking about an area I'm very passionate about. I don't know what studies could be done, but at a minimum, I would love to see council take some benchmark readings of the air quality currently along Parramatta Road, and especially around where that funnel is going up opposite Bunnings. And I'll tell you why, because I've been to quite a lot of these WestConnex meetings, and the premise of their argument why they're not filtered, these stacks, is simplistic and absurd. What they're saying is that they will remove the traffic from Parramatta Road. We've seen the paraphernalia, and they'll put it underground. And then the traffic will be less on Parramatta Road, and therefore the air quality will improve on Parramatta Road. And they'll take that air quality from Parramatta Road that's been improved, put it back into the tunnel, mix it with the dirty, polluted air, put a bit more clean air, a bit more air into the mix, and then pump it back out. So therefore, you see, we're not actually increasing the pollution levels. All we're doing is kind of mixing it about, substituting it, and pumping it all out. And now I pointed out to them, do you really believe that when the tunnel gets clogged, no one will use Parramatta Road? They, of course, have got no studies, and there's no comeback to that. And that's the whole problem with their argument. Yes, you can put it into the tunnel and concentrate the pollution and put it out of stack, but Parramatta Road will be continued to use. What, in essence, you have done is create 2 roads for traffic. So the air quality today is going to get worse simply because you have 2 more roads to hold that traffic. You've increased the capacity. Increasing capacity increases cars, increases pollution. So having a benchmark reading on Parramatta Road today with that traffic would be useful in the future if we have to mount a class action to say, you said that the readings were going to improve. You said that we didn't need filters in those stacks because we were going to have better readings. Well, these things prove you wrong. I recently spoke with a doctor from RPA, Dr. Paul Torzillo, respiratory specialist, and he talked about how damaging the impacts of pollution is on our city. Any increase is going to be reflected in respiratory illness for our citizens for many, many years to come. And whatever the cost of that filter is today, it's going to be tenfold, 100-fold when those diseases start coming to the fore. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on item 2? Lucille McKenna.
Can I actually speak on WestConnex?
Yep.
Some people here may not be aware that I was involved in this right from the beginning, 2013 actually, and the EIS report that was done by Ashfield Council in relation to stage 1 certainly had air experts and people that took air quality monitoring at that time. So much of that stuff is contained in the EIS that was submitted, I think, in the beginning of 2016, or was it 15? I can't remember, but it's all on the Ashfield, all on the website under WestConnex. So it's very readily available, all that information.
Thank you. Yes. Yep.
Hi. I'm Richard Dudley Smith from Annandale. Yes, it's quite clear that, in fact, actually, the general public have really no idea what they're facing. And one of the facts that only came to me very recently was that I was talking to somebody who's a senior traffic advisor to the Sydney City Council, who told me that he wondered if people really realised that the intersection at Rozelle Lilyfield was going to be the largest intersection in the Southern Hemisphere. And he said, and he wondered actually if people realised that in fact all these tunnels, they're not just one layer of tunnels, there's going to be 3 layers of tunnels. The tunnel depth under that area of the suburb is going to be about 100 metres. The lowest level will be 100 metres down, and he estimated that the top level would be about 4 metres under the ground. So the whole of Lilyfield Rozelle will look like Swiss cheese underneath there. He also said that the situation where if you got a traffic jam on the lowest level, how on earth were you going to get the people up from 100 metres down below? And also that the filtration that they are putting forward is going to be the suggested method of use is going to be totally inadequate. One of the reasons being that the sort of tunnel, the tunnel filtration that they're using, in theory, works perfectly well in a straight line. If you get a pipe and run water down it, the water runs down a pipe perfectly well. But if you then put a right angle bend in it, the water then clogs up. And that's exactly the situation that you're going to get on these mammoth circles underneath Lilyfield. He also told me that in order to get the filtration, in order to get the contamination, the contaminated air out of those tunnels, if people thought that this sort of filtration was going to do the job, they were sadly mistaken. It was going to cost millions of dollars and extreme expense of all sorts of pumps and filtrations to get the contaminated air out of there. Also, that the stacks, as they are positioned at the moment, which is in the rail yards at the end of the crescent, are in the totally wrong place, because this sort of filtration, these sort of stacks and filtration have the potential to work if they're located on high ground, where the air running around dissipates the pollution. But to have the stacks in a valley is completely the wrong position to have this sort of filtration, and will just lead to enormous contamination for a radius of 1 kilometre around that area. Dr. Allen, who I've also spoken to, told me that if the WestConnex is built, there will be approximately an additional 3,000 deaths a year from respiratory diseases. These would include stroke, cancer, respiratory failure, and all other diseases associated with pollution. So, but the general public have no idea that the Roselle Lilyfield thing is going to be three levels of construction.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
Any other speakers on item 2? Rab, can you put up the... So I'm going to add an additional resolution, which is a few people, and Victor Macri raised it, about the need to do air quality monitoring relating to the pollution stacks associated with WestConnex. So we need, I think, the pre and post operation data needs to be clearly, publicly, transparently available in real time. I understand the White Bay cruise ship terminal monitoring works pretty well in terms of informing residents about how that facility is performing. This is a bit different because we're talking multiple stacks, but the issues are very significant and real to communities in St. Peter's, in Haberfield, in Roselle, right across the local government area. So I'm adding an additional resolution, which is 4. On the bottom of, as you can see there. So with that addition, and I'm very happy to support the recommendations relating to the funding requests for the Disconnects exhibition, and also the event by Newtown residents against WestConnex. So we add that additional recommendation, and I adopt that as Council's resolution, and we will be in contact with the EPA about recommendation resolution 4. So thank you everyone for your contributions there. I think we now move to item 3, which is the slight change of mood, which is the Ashfield pool. I have a couple of speakers. So I've got Mark Drury and then Julie Passos.
We're a dynamic duo. Thank you, Administrator. This is a tremendous result for all of us who want a modernised pool. For all of us who work so hard through at least 100 hours of meetings and an equal amount of reading to get to those meetings, and pages and pages and pages. It's a great result for those of us who've spent our own money and time visiting other modern pools, spending time speaking to members of the swim club, the casual users, the serious, crazy early morning swimmers, the swim class mums, the sports people, and everyone who loves that pool. And everyone who thinks that just because it's a suburban pool, it doesn't need to be second rate. We can have a great pool there. I thank Josephine and John for the leadership and the work that was done on this consultation. I thank Peter Gainsford for guiding guiding us to this stage and introducing the great idea of getting a gym in to help reduce the running costs. The community has spoken yet again. It wants this pool. It wants it now. It wants it delivered. I urge you to adopt these recommendations and the council staff to crack on with getting us our new pool.
Thank you, Mark. Julie?
I'm totally opposed, Mr. Pearson, to you approving this multi-million-dollar complex. You are an administrator, and for such an expensive issue, I think it should be left to the new council. Yes, the residents would like us to get on. The residents had to live for years as their swimming tiles falling off the side of the pool. No oxyvivors, no lifesavers. There were 2 deaths at Ashfield swimming pool. The place has been a joke, losing nearly $1 million every year. This concept that's put up is not for Ashfield. It's for, we're installing a polo pool. I've yet to find one member of the Ashfield municipality or the inner west that plays polo. We are putting a polo pool in for certain clubs, select clubs, that have no affiliation with this area. Our residents have been paying high rates since the suspect questionnaire went out. The residents do not want this type of expenditure on the pool. Residents want a pool for their kids to learn to swim, the elderly, the aged, and the people that have had operations, hydrotherapy exercises, and somewhere for people, especially the people in the units, to go down and cool off. I don't think, Mr. Pearson, you as an administrator who will be leaving this council after September have a right to approve this. This should be left for the new council. As we know with the Civic Centre, the building we have here now the residents were told 10 million, ended up 22 million. It's falling to pieces. And we don't want the same to happen with the swimming pool. I don't believe the information to residents was correct. Residents were misled. This is too expensive for the ratepayers to have to foot the bill. People, yes, they would like a nice pool. Our municipality would like that. And a pool that the tiles are not falling off the side while they're swimming, which people have put up with for years and the councillors didn't give 2 hoots about it. In 2004, we sold a public car park to Crown developers and 2.5 for peanuts, and that money was put into the Ashfield pool for an upgrade prior to a council election. Good money thrown after bad. I'd like another minute. I am totally opposed to you, Mr. Pearson, signing off on this complex. This has not been sent out to the residents in the proper manner. The first instance, if it was, we just heard that all these hours that were spent on the committee for the pool. Well, if all those hours were spent, why didn't they get it right the first time? Why did you have to go out and have another conversation? We cannot do this. This is public money. People work hard to pay their rates. They are paying very high rates here. That's all I'm getting back. Nobody wants a polo pool. When was the last gold medalist at the Olympics came from Ashfield? We do not need a polo pool. We need an acceptable building and pool for the people, not this over-the-top stuff for clubs that have not put a cent in this municipality.
Thank you, Julie. Any other speakers on item 3, Ashfield Aquatic Centre upgrade? I might ask John Warburton to respond to some of the comments made.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pearson. Look, firstly, it should be said that this is the culmination of a very long process that really goes back to the operations of the former Ashfield Council, and has a huge amount of work has been done over a very, very long period of time. In terms of the actual report that we have before Council, this is essentially bringing back the results of what we believe, a very successful engagement process. There was extensive engagement at the pool and thousands of residents around the pool, and we ended up having approximately 1,300 to 1,400 responses to the survey in relation to the pool, and the response was overwhelmingly positive towards the refurbishment of the pool. Now, the key issue that really was being ventilated was, well, there was an original tendered version which was put up as an option in the engagement, and there was a version, an option that was put up that included a gym, and it also included a standalone water polo pool, and there was a version put up which actually included a gym, but also had the more focus on a water play area and a family area and a shared facility which had a 50-metre pool and a water polo pool. So there were some key questions that the community was being asked to consider about whether they valued its use as a water polo facility. The engagement was very, very clear about this, and if you go look at the engagement report, it sets out some of the graphs that show how people feel about the use as the options. So it was option 2 and option 3, option 2 being the shared use and option 3 being the standalone water polo pool. And now if you actually look at the total responses from the community in relation to the options, they clearly favoured option 3. They clearly showed that option 3, having a standalone water polo pool, was the favoured option. Even if, and we recognise that there was a lot of input into the survey from various clubs and the water polo players, even if you actually take a separate look at the responses, taking out the water polo players, the community, and you just have responses from other users in the community, they still actually, it's generally 50-50 between the water polo pool and the shared use facility. So on balance, it was really quite clear that the option 3, which had a standalone water polo pool, was highly supported by the community. Now, once the committee had met and had a look at that, we had a really, really good look at the key users for the pool, and in particular, looking at ways, well, perhaps there can be we can have our cake and eat it too, and looked at ways of actually having a standalone water polo pool, but also increasing the family area, increasing the size of the grandstand, looking at ways to actually create more open space and to actually create a water play area. And that's the option that we're putting before the council today, which we believe actually answers all the issues raised in the community engagement. And I must say, I do thoroughly reject the assertion that in some way the residents were misled during the engagement process. Great care was taken during the engagement, and there's absolutely no doubt there was a very, very positive overall response, a massive response and a positive response during the engagement. Thank you.
Excuse me, I think I have a right reply.
No, Julie. Sorry, no, Julie. That was an objective response. All he responded was in relation to the community survey that's been undertaken.
I said the latest questionnaire to the residents.
Okay, so I accept your clarification. Thank you, Julie. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. I accept your clarification. Having accepted your clarification, I also think that council staff have done a very good job in the latest round of consultation. I can't speak for earlier rounds of consultation. I wasn't here. I was here as a resident, but I wasn't here in any official capacity. So thank you, Julie. Thank you. In relation to your point, in relation to the point about whether an administrator should be making this decision, I think there is ample evidence that the former Ashfield Council was obviously committed to proceeding with this. There were different views within council, obviously. I have run this through the Local Representation Advisory Committee at least twice, and that's frankly the best mechanism I have at present of getting the views of the former councillors in relation to this significant initiative. So I think that has been successfully accomplished. There was a special rate variation collected for this very purpose, which is sitting waiting to be spent on, as you have correctly identified, Julie, the significant maintenance issues that the council pool faces at this time. So I am going to adopt the recommendations that are before you, and I do thank staff for the very significant work they've done in a short period of time, but a very comprehensive piece of work that they've done. So thank you everyone for your contribution on that. We do now move to the operational plan and budget for 2017-18, which obviously commits council to very significant undertakings in the next financial year, and which I need to, as administrator, adopt, but I do throw it open to the floor. I have some registered speakers. I've got, again, I'll take it in order, Mark Drury.
Thank you, Administrator. I urge you to adopt the plan and the budget because it builds on the sterling work of the three former councillors, ably led by three Labor mayors, Darcy, Sam, Lucille, and the general managers that supported them. It's a good budget that delivers all sorts of services, activities, improvements to our public facilities that our community expects, deserves, and in some cases actually needs. It's got over $65 million of new capital works, $241 million in expenditure. The overall structure of this is good. There are a few bibs and bobs that are out of place, but I'm sure we can sort that out. I note that there are those who have a whole lot of great ideas for how council can spend money. They're always up here with a great idea about how we could slip $300 here or $700 there. They're not involved in doing the hard lifting and having the heavy discussions about what the council budget should look like. The paper shows us that the amalgamated council does not solve all our financial problems. Surprise, surprise. Those of us who have read those papers realise in the next 2 terms of council, there are some significant and really hard decisions that council will need to make. I urge residents to think carefully about who they want to be making those decisions. One less than shiny note. On page 80 of the fees and charges, there's a suggestion that maybe we should harmonise the late fees for picking up kids late from childcare. Seems to me that perhaps there needs to be a bit more consultation in relation to that matter, because I think there's been a bit of an outcry. It also seems to me that that's not going to dramatically affect the bottom line. I thank Michael, Pav, and the General Manager for the work they've done with the staff to get the budget to the position where it is. It's consistent with what the previous council was done, and it's set up a good structure and a good framework. I'd urge council staff to continue to take seriously the issues in relation to depreciation. I'll have another minute if I can. Seriously take issues in depreciation, to take them serious, so we don't get in the situation like we were with the pool, where we got an old, worn-out asset and no one had put any money aside to actually replace it and do stuff. I'd also urge staff to actually deliver the projects in the financial year that we promise them. Residents of the Inner West are sick and tired of us saying, in this financial year, you'll get X, and then they sit around. We need to get much better at that, and I expect the General Manager and the Deputy General Managers to be able to deliver on that. I look forward to playing a part in the framing of the next budget, and That's only, of course, if the residents of Ashfield, Summerhill and Dulwich Hill want me to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna York.
Thanks, Chair. I also wanted to refer to specifically to the proposed fee rises that Mark referred to earlier about outside school hours care. As one of the Labor candidates in the Stanmore ward for the upcoming election, Stanmore PS parents have raised serious concerns about the impact on their OOSH services, including the introduction of a new late payment fee that is 5% of the weekly gap fee and a substantial increase in the late pickup fee from $43.30 for every 15 minutes to $45 and $100 after the second late pickup. Council appears to have paid no regard to fairness in pushing up these fees. Instead, it appears to be looking for an opportunity to rake in an extra buck, in this case at parents' expense. I hope that this is not the case, but unfortunately, no evidence has been provided that the impact on parents has been considered at all. No comparison or acknowledgement about the size of the increase is made in the papers, and Council has offered no explanation or justification for the fee hike. The impact is to slug parents who, on the whole, are trying to do the right thing. Reading into the sparse information that has been provided, it appears that someone's identified the highest fee structure across all former council areas and slapped it on all childcare services across the board, including OOSH. I can think of three possible explanations for this. One, council wants to introduce the same fee structure across all three council areas, in which case there is no reason why the absolute highest should be chosen. Why not the lowest, or one that recovers costs only? Two, perhaps council thinks they will disincentivise parents from being late to pick up by plucking a number like $100 out of the air without thinking what that amount of money for being a minute late actually means for families with working parents or other caring responsibilities. I acknowledge there may be issues with so-called repeat offenders, but it is inappropriate and unfair to the vast majority of parents to treat everyone like they are out to do the wrong thing. Which leaves, I think, only the third option, which is that council is taking advantage of the amalgamation to make a buck off childcare services. Again, I hope this is not the case, but it certainly appears to be and risks undermining confidence in council and the entire amalgamation. My questions to council are, what justification is there for a rise to $100 beyond bringing fees in line with the highest fee structure in the council area? What assurance is there that other schools and OOSH services in addition to Stanmore Public School are not impacted by these proposed fee increases, and by how much? What effort has council made to understand how much more parents will be paying? What evidence is there that parents will be less likely to be late by increasing already high late pickup penalties?
Would you like another minute?
I'd like another 30 seconds.
Yep.
How much confidence can residents have that this approach of jacking up fees to the highest possible option hasn't been applied in other areas in the name of harmonisation? If the answer to these questions is none, I urge council to reconsider this proposal and abandon the unfair and unjustified increase to OOSH and other childcare fees. Council should not be about making childcare council should be about making childcare services more accessible and affordable to parents, not less.
Thank you. Paul Avery.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Paul Avery. I'm the Registrar for Balmain and District Football Club, and the item that I'm addressing tonight on behalf of our members is the funding of the Waterfront Oval upgrade in item 4, attachment 3. We are obviously grateful for the council, for you, Mr Pearson, giving us $440,000 for the partial upgrade of the Oval. However, we are disappointed. Our 2,648 members are disappointed that the full amount that was unanimously agreed to and supported by the previous Leichhardt Council 14 months ago hasn't been allocated in the current budget. The monies that are there at the moment will go a small way towards the upgrade that's required. At the moment, we have 580 players under 8 years of age who are playing on Waterfront Oval at Callum Park every weekend. The field is not able to stand up to the level of activity that's on there. Within the council area, there are not enough parks, there's not enough fields, there are not enough playing surfaces. We have around 1,000 players every weekend who are taking to Waterfront Oval to play soccer. Our desire was to have the full amount of close to $2 million actually allocated into the 17-18 budget so that the works could be completed in time for March next year, by the end of March next year. Our belief was that around 8 to 9 months to actually upgrade fields, not create new ones, simply upgrade what's already there, would have been sufficient. So we are disappointed that that's not going to happen. As many of the councillors, previous councillors would have been aware, and I believe you are as well, the training allocations we have in the Inner West Council area and the previous Leichhardt Council are woefully inadequate. Many of our games are already played on away fields. We are in desperate need of the playing fields. We are particularly in desperate need of having a field that is sustainable and usable and able to be adequate during the season. This upgrade will address the imbalance, but it won't fix the long-term problem. We would have preferred to see the full amount of $2 million spent in the current year, so the full upgrade could have been achieved. The upgrade of Waterfront Oval is not a political issue. It had unanimous support from the previous Leichhardt Council, from Labor, Liberal, Greens and Independents. 12 councillors all agreed to spend developers' Section 94 money, $2 million worth, on the upgrade 14 months ago. It's disappointing that we've seen nothing come from that yet. It is more disappointing that we'll only see a partial upgrade occur on the budgeted figures here for next year. We would have preferred to see the whole amount. I would ask for another minute. We are grateful for what has been allocated to the budget, and it will assist to an extent. But we will certainly, we would ask you tonight to change your mind and to fund the full $2 million. But with that not happening, we will certainly canvass the candidates for the upcoming election to ensure that the work that was started 14 months ago will be continued by the new council and see their commitment to delivering on the project which was funded and promised 14 months ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Julie Passos.
Yes, thank you.
Is it any wonder that people do not trust politicians? Is it any wonder? Now, the first speaker on the budget said that he urges the council and the staff to get moving on all the things that have to be done and implemented. There's a resident in Ashfield that's been waiting for 15 years, 3 months and 2 weeks for a roundabout that was resolved to be implemented. On the council, and the former councillor that just said he urges the staff to get moving on all these, on other things, was well aware of this. Nothing was done. 3 years ago, it was resolved to build a new toilet in Summer Hill. Not a thing's been done. And you wonder why people don't trust politicians. I would like to know, before any issue, I don't doubt the new council and the staff might implement the things that are proposed in this, because it's a complete change. The dead wood's gone. They've learnt their lesson. And people would have to ask themselves, why did the 3 former councils not fight the amalgamations? And I will tell you why, because they had nothing to fight with. They weren't good enough to fight because they let the residents down for years and years. That's why they didn't fight the amalgamations, because too much would have been uncovered. Now, I would like to know, have issues that were resolved on the former council, will they be implemented before this new wish list is started on? There are residents. Excuse me, Richard, why didn't you tell him to be quiet?
Order, thanks. Julie, please. Julie, please.
Black coffee.
Julie, please continue.
Well, I would just like to know what is happening with past resolutions that have been in abeyance for years. It is no good. Nothing's changed. The problems are still there. They need to be rectified before we embark on any new issues. You can't ignore the residents. The residents have been waiting. They've been conned. They've been treated like fools. They've been treated like idiots. They have spent time. They have paperwork from floor to ceiling with how they were misled by the former council. They attended meetings. They attended special traffic committee meetings. Nothing done. We spent... Sorry, Richard, you've only got till September. Then you can raise your eyes as much as you like.
Continue, because that was nothing to do with you, so please continue.
No, you raised your eyes.
No, I did not. Continue, please. Continue, please.
I'm sorry if you don't like what I say.
I would like you to focus on the substance of the item. Thank you.
My views are valid, and I am speaking on behalf of the residents. I am not speaking because there's an election coming up. What you see with me is
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that. Please continue. Or don't. Thank you. Anybody else speaking on this item? I've got Darcy Byrne and then John Stamolis.
Good night, Shirley. You don't have a black coffee, son. Mr. Administrator, you won't be surprised to discover that I wish to address the outrageous, and it is outrageous and savage cuts which you are set to adopt tonight to sport and recreation facilities in the former Leichhardt Council area. Not everyone in the room tonight will be aware, but I'm sure the representatives from Balmain District Football Club are, and all of the former elected representatives from Leichhardt Council will know, that before the amalgamation, we managed to allocate funding to important projects for sport and recreation in our area because we knew that there'd be uncertainty afterwards. We knew that there was a knife hanging over the top of our heads and that we might not be around for long. And some of those projects included $2 million for the upgrade of the Waterfront Drive sporting fields, home to Balmain District Football Club, the largest junior sporting club in New South Wales, who are playing on a goat track. It's a goat track. The funding was for lighting, for resurfacing of the field, for a renovation of the sheds. We also delivered funding for a new skate and BMX park, which local kids have been calling for over a decade. Funding for Dawn Fraser Swimming Pool, one of the most famous institutions in Australia, which desperately needs a heritage upgrade. And funding for safety upgrades to every playground in the municipality to put shade sails over them all so that kids weren't exposed to dangerous sun and didn't have their skin damaged. I'm disappointed to say that despite having tried very hard to work constructively with you lot in the last few months to make sure that this was delivered, that none of those projects are proceeding as they should in this budget. In fact, $3 million has been cut from this budget, which was fully funded before you were appointed by the state government. And I think that is a disgrace. If I can touch just briefly on the issue of Waterfront Drive. We've got kids down there playing in unsafe conditions. And you're saying to them, look, despite the fact that we did nothing for the last 12 months to progress the project, we'll fund the lights. Even though we've all told you that funding the lights without renovating the field won't mean anything because the field's so badly damaged by this time in the year that any additional usage won't be achieved. I mean, anyone who's swum at Dawn Fraser Swimming Pool or has grown up in our area is actually familiar with the local residents, knows how valuable that place is and the special place that it holds in local people's hearts. It rings to me as though these are things that the unelected council simply doesn't understand. Now, I know that the administrator will say in his response subsequently to the gallery that these are delays from the state government. And some of that is true. And I think I, of all people, could say that I've been fairly vociferous in my advocacy to the state government for a fair deal for our local community. But I might remind you that you are appointees of the state government. You are a state government agency. This is not a local council. I'll ask for an extension of time of 1 minute.
You can have an extension of time by 1 minute.
This is not a local council that's been elected by local residents, and so it's not good enough for you to say that the people who appointed you on enormous remuneration weren't able to get the job done and you weren't able to have any influence on them. What are you being paid for if not for that? This council is a state government agency. In 3 months' time, we'll hold an election to elect a new council that will represent the local community. And I have a brief and respectful message to all of the public servants who'll be left over after the administrator has left. Please don't think, I'm glad you find it funny, Michael, I don't. Please don't think for a moment that this is going to operate as an unelected corporation after you've got elected representatives in here. When that happens, the community's voice will be heard, local representatives will make the policy decisions, and public servants will implement them. This is not a business, it's a government. And any government worth that name would know that you don't cut $3 million from sport and recreation facilities.
Thank you. John Stamoulis.
Yes, look, I was very troubled by some comments made by an ex-councillor earlier on this meeting, so this is the opportunity to point out that we have a 239-page document before us which details the operational plan and budget, which shows that there is no funding of councillors' campaigns, there is no funding of any candidate, and there is no funding of any councillor. I think the remarks made earlier that are now on the public record are dreadful, are uncharacteristic of any words that any councillor generally makes. And if there was any way of striking them off the record of council, I would ask that to be done, but I assume that's very difficult to do. This besmirches a candidate who is not here to defend themselves, and I think the comments are highly inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this item? So I'm going to ask maybe more than one person, but I'm going to go to John Warburton initially.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pearson. In relation to the childcare fees, so these late fees, whilst they're called fees, they really are designed as a disincentive for parents. The issue here is that, and it's really council's intention that no one pays this fee. It's actually the most desirable situation is that the council does not collect $1 from late fees of any type. Really, this is an issue for the operation of childcare centres. When centres are run, they have a licence to look after children until 6 p.m. in the evening. That licence doesn't extend over 6 p.m. and it causes a lot of operational issues. Staff have to stay back, and it's very distressing for children having to wait for parents. Now, the reality is most parents do the right thing, but there have been some parents who fall into perhaps a habit and become repeat offenders. So this late fee is really designed to just as an incentive for parents not to do that, and is used. It's a very standard fee across right across Sydney. Most childcare centres have some sort of a late fee. This is more or less in the ballpark. If it's only a modest amount, it doesn't actually act as a disincentive. It has to be a significant amount, and the idea is that parents always come before 6 p.m. to pick up their children. So that's really the purpose of it. It's designed to not be collected at all.
Thank you. I would like someone to talk to the waterfront oval issue, which has been raised. So, Cathy Edwards-Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Waterfront Oval has been funded over 2 financial years, so there's $440,000 in year 1 and $1,560,000 in year 2, and this reflects our capacity to deliver this project. We do need a DA for this project, and past history and experience demonstrates that this is likely to take over 6 months, so that is why we've phased it over 2 years.
And the DA issue being because the Heritage Council concurrence is required for it. So I'm going to just make a couple of comments. I'm going to Mark Drury's point about council delivering what it promises. I think that is absolutely critical. We are promising to deliver $65.5 to be precise, $1 million worth of capital works in the next financial year in 17-18. That is 20 million more than the 3 former councils were able to do. No comment, no aspersion on them. It's just our size and some of the stronger community funding we've obtained will enable us to fund more projects this year, some very substantial projects. It is, I'm disappointed that we can't commit to the full funding on Waterfront Oval. I could put it in but I could put it in for $2 million, but it won't get spent, it won't happen, and I'm not prepared to deceive the community by doing that. I'm going to be faithful to the mantra that Mark Drury correctly articulated, that council should do what it promises. And I don't, on all the evidence, believe if I put $2 million in this financial year for Waterfront Oval, believe that it will be delivered. So I'm not going to do that, while I respect the views of the club and Darcy Byrne. So I'm going to adopt the budget as identified. In relation to childcare fee, I accept that there are some potential imposts on parents through that, but it is about not incurring the charge. We don't want to gain 1 cent from that charge. We hope that parents will pick their kids up on time. I know it can be difficult at times, but we really don't want that to be a repeat offender problem. So we haven't, you know, the fees I'm told are in the ballpark. They're not as, they're larger than they were, absolutely, but they're not as big as some councils charge. So I am going to adopt the budget as recommended. I do thank everybody for their contribution. And in relation to the John Stamoulis comment, I did before this meeting make a comment that we are recording contributions, if I can put it that way, and people bear the responsibility for their comments. We certainly don't redact, delete, or edit comments. They do bear the responsibility. That's all I want to say on that point. So thank you, and I adopt the budget as recommended. Move to item 5, which is the Victoria Road planning proposal. And I have speakers galore on this item. Starting with John Farry. Is John Farry here? Yep.
Thanks. I'm speaking in favour of the council's recommendations. I've just noticed over the years I've been following this, which has been since 2014, that planning and the considerations of the local residents have really been superseded, I believe, by the political process and sort of lobbying by both sides of kind of politics. And it's great to see that council is really looking at the merits of the proposal and the effect that it's going to have on the people that live there and use the area. I note that the council proposal has looked at things like the acquisition of private property, which is blatantly unfair and unreasonable. They looked at the acquisition of public land along Wicks Park, which is also blatantly unreasonable. They look at considerations like the blocking of sunlight into Wicks Park and the effect that that's going to have on the amenity of Wicks Park, which I also believe is unreasonable, traffic, flooding, and a number of other things. So I'd really like to thank the council for looking at the actual planning issues and not being swept away by the politics, which I believe was one of the faults of the previous council. And I basically hope that common sense will prevail, and at the very least this proposal will be looked at on its merits in terms of planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Makakis.
Thank you, Chairperson and Council, for the opportunity to address you on behalf of our company, family company, Ranch Dice Pty Limited, which is the registered proprietor of 205 to 207 Victoria Road, Marrickville, situated on the southwest corner on the Sydenham Road and Victoria Road intersection. My family are current landowners in Precinct 47, the Marrickville LGA, and the surrounding locality. We have a significant and broad involvement in Marrickville and the local community. Generally, our family has been very supportive of the renewal of Precinct 47, and we have been supportive of the Gateway planning proposal and agree that it endeavours to regenerate the precinct. Our property is affected, however, by the specific part of the proposal which seeks to resume the land at the Victoria Road and Sydenham Road intersection, which we are unfortunately not in a position to accept. This has been identified in item 5 of the agenda under recommendation A1 and A2 on page 426 of today's council minutes. According to council's minutes, the proponent's traffic and transport assessment report prepared by Hyder Consulting, originally submitted with a planning proposal, identified that the intersection of Victoria Road and Sydenham Road will likely require upgrades to mitigate additional traffic generation resulting from the redevelopment associated with the planning proposal. The original report did not make references to road widening. The RMS found this traffic report to be preliminary in nature. Council also engaged an independent traffic specialist who undertook their own review and asked questions determining if there were land acquisition requirements. Accordingly, Council requested for further details of the upgrade of this intersection. According to Council's minutes, in response, the proponent carried out more detailed traffic and transport assessment and submitted an addendum to the original report, and the addendum identified the need to acquire private property, which included our property at 205-207 Victoria Road. Our property consists of 5 ground floor retail shops, which makes a very significant positive contribution to Marrickville and part of the local community. It consists of, and there are some photos here, I'm not sure if you can see them, of a costume shop, a new pizza restaurant, which has just signed a long-term lease, Camp Boss coffee shop, hairdresser, ceramics retailer. The loss of the property would be a substantial loss to the community of Marrickville. 5 businesses will be extinguished, loss of employment, as well as the considerable loss to the local residents and visitors who frequent those shops. This would be a detrimental and undesirable impact to the character and amenity of the locality.
Would you like another minute?
Yes, please. So, in summary, we are definitely not against the Precinct 47 planning proposal. We are absolutely against any measures which seek to widen the intersection of Sydenham and Victoria Road, particularly which would result in the acquisition of property. The proponents have advised me that there have been additional reports prepared which demonstrate that the road widening is not required and that the Precinct 47 planning proposal can operate and function without the need to widen the road. We believe the road widening is an undesirable outcome, and that specific part of the proposal should not be supported. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Dan Jacobson. Is Dan Jacobson here? No. Todd Wagstaff.
Good evening. My name's Todd Wagstaff. I'm a resident of Frampton Avenue in Marrickville. Been asked to come and speak tonight from the Danius family regarding some thoughts around their proposal. In my role as an expert in the arts industry, which I've been working in now for 3 decades, for most of that time a resident of Marrickville also. To qualify just quickly my role in the arts, I worked across the industry as a talent scout, an A&R executive and an artist manager in the business for 25 years. My first band was a group called UMI, arguably the most critically acclaimed artists of the 1990s. I've worked with a long list of artists since then that includes, by way of referencing my credentials, the Vines, the Veronicas, Panau, Evermore, Empire of the Sun and Blue Juice. It's a large mix of artists for certain, but one constant across these has been for my need to look for supporters to champion these young maverick artists' careers, to seed the very beginning of those careers, champions with access to warehouse spaces for rehearsals, places to build, recording studios, financing at times for travel or to chase down creative opportunities. In my career, the Danius family, I think it's important to know, have stood out for their constant contribution to the arts. It's going to come as a shock to many people in the community from what I've understood in some of the comments, to know that the Danius family financed a aptly named but seminal record label, Timberyard Records, from their Timberyard from the mid-1980s onwards. That label released the first EPs for the band UMI before they kindly handed the baton to myself to take forward. They released records in that period for other key artists, including the Cosmic Psychos, Kim Salmon and the Surrealists, the Boxer Jesuits. These names might sound like fictional band names to people not educated in the history of contemporary music in Australia, but time has judged their choice as well. And any music critic would recognise these artists as internationally important and influential. Hallmark of Timberyard Records was that it actually paid for the artists to make the records. They had a massive equipment, amps, guitars, that they would lend their artists for touring purposes and recordings. They showed impeccable taste and instinct for the arts, came from an understanding of why an arts community means to a society. They showed a generosity to the arts without public recognition for their contribution. They did that for more than 20 years. It was never a publicity stunt, but rather
another minute.
Do you want
another minute?
Another minute, please. Yeah. Those artists, they continued through the 1990s and the 2000s. They worked across subsidising my office. The manager for Leon, who manages the DMA, is a massive band from Sydney right now. They provided a studio and a home for Nick Littlemore and Luke Steele, were from their warehouse in Victoria Road to birth Empire of the Sun, that went on to be a massive artist around the world. I've got no expertise in urban development, but I do love pop culture and move through the world with my eyes open. I work in London, Los Angeles, and New York. Over the decades in those metropolises, I've seen, the evolution of the creative hubs. Brooklyn, is the place I now do meetings rather than Manhattan. Shoreditch rather than Soho. LA downtown, over Beverly Hills or Hollywood. These great cities have repurposed their bordering industrial areas with creative hubs. Flipping spaces no longer functional, or that were previously businesses for the technology is now made obsolete. That rejuvenation most successful with planning and investment, not left to random choice.
If you could finish up, Todd, thanks.
All right. If Marrickville is going to emerge as the creative satellite to Sydney that many of its residents, like myself, hope to, these disparate and draw these disparate creative businesses together, it needs more than just a postcode. I think the plans for Rich Street are outstanding and no doubt would rejuvenate the area from a tired industrial area it is now, and bring in not just the current creative businesses, but bring in further flagship creative industries to drive the area forward. Thanks.
Thank you. David Rodriguez.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's David Rodriguez. I've lived in the inner west since 1969, little boy. I own a property on 96 Victoria Road, which is a small business, and I live in Marrickville as well. And I'm talking on behalf of many of my neighbours in the area as well. Now, we've all been down Enmore Road, now Newtown area, King Street, all those fantastic restaurants we all love to eat, and then we go past Stanmore Road, Enmore Road, and then it's more like residential. It's a beautiful area. It's like nice old houses, you know, a few little shops here and there. Soon as you turn onto Victoria Road, what do you see? It looks like old dilapidated buildings, pretty ugly. Soon as you turn onto Victoria Road. Now, this Victoria Road precinct is going to be something positive for the area. We can see that it's going to bring a lot of small little businesses and medium-sized businesses where and residential. So I actually work like about a kilometre away from my house, and I walk a lot of the times to work. And if we have residential and small businesses in the same area, that can only be a positive thing, where you don't really need a car to get around, even though that can benefit. That's not good for me because I'm a motor mechanic. You want more cars in the area, but it doesn't really matter. Like, it's a much more environment friendly thing to be able to work close to where you live. So I think it's a very positive thing that they're doing here, and it's not taking away anything from parks. It looks like by the planning, there's going to be like a bit more green area. So it's all good. I know that guy doesn't.
Order, thanks. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a positive thing that I see, and many of the residents have spoken to me about it as well, and we all agree that it is a nice thing. Yeah, even I went to high school here at the end of Dulwich High School in the 80s. And back then there was like 1,200 students. Now the schools are also, I think, half capacity now. They're like 600 or 700. So it is an area that can take more people in the area. It's always been, I've always lived in that area, and it just needs to be redeveloped a little bit. It'll improve the area, and like I said, better lifestyle. We're so close to the city. We can catch trains. We can put extra buses on. It is a win-win situation when we've looked at it. And anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Sean Mackin.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the council tonight. I'm speaking on behalf of the proponent and in favour of the original proposal, and I'm very proud to put my name to this proposal. It's something I'm more than happy to support. It is also something that I'm not alone in having support for. This item has been to 3 previous elected councils 3 times, and it has at every time been supported by the local community representatives on that council. It's been at the Department of Planning 3 times, and at each time the Department of Planning have indicated to Council that this item has strategic merit and should be pursued. But most importantly, this item has been the subject of a very extensive community consultation process twice, one for an extended period of time. And through that process, the community voiced their opinion, and the overwhelming number of submissions on this application were in favour. It is the only application of any substance I know in the inner west in the last 30 years where the community have come out and said, we want change. And there is a very, very good reason all that has happened. Because if you care about the environment, you would not support what's there now. With the exception of Wicks Park, this precinct barely has a tree. The leading cause of new pollution into the Cooks River is runoff from this industrial estate. Every drop of rain that lands on it in this precinct lands either on a hot tin roof or a concrete hard stand and then washes into the Cooks River with all the pollutants and pollution that it carries. If you cared about affordable housing, you would support the original proposal. If our original proposal is supported, it will be the largest increase of affordable housing in the local government area, and I'm stand corrected if I'm right, but since 1965, a lot longer than my entire life. It is a critically important issue. At the moment, while Council has a policy that they support more affordable housing, and we all do, Council's current planning policy at the moment is for there to be none. And every other planning proposal that has been put up in recent months, there has been no inclusion of any affordable housing. We're offering 5%, and it's a substantial increase on on anything that's been offered before. If you cared about aircraft noise, you'd support our original proposal. The Sydney Airports Corporation has supported only one residential development in the high aircraft noise corridor, this one. And they did so because they see that the plan that we have put forward is actually will resolve the issues of aircraft noise for future residents and protect them from and improve their local amenity. They see our proposal as a template for what should be done elsewhere. But more importantly, I think Council has long stated that it cares about the creative arts. The previous Director of Planning in Marrickville Council told me quite openly that the only creative arts that have ever flourished in Marrickville have done so in spite of Council's policies. That their activities have gone, just 1 minute.
Extra minute, yep.
That their activities have been more or less not approvable under the local environment plan. Most galleries are not suitable for IN1. Most music and performance venues are not suitable for IN1. Our proposal makes them permissible. I'll wind up very quickly just by saying you don't have to agree with everything that we've put forward, and there are cases both for and against. And council officers, to their credit, have been remarkably consistent in their opposing any substantial land use changes in this precinct. That's their view. They've put it to the department before, and they've put it to others before, and the department have politely told them that they disagree. You don't have to agree with this proposal, and I respect the council officers for reiterating their previous response, but that's not really what they were asked to do. The gateway and the request from the Department of Planning was for you to consult the local community. And I do object to the summary of all those submissions, all those people who wrote submissions, to be relegated to a small section on page 529 of a very long report. In winding up, I appreciate the effort everyone has made in bringing this proposal forward, but I do ask that the community consultation report that Council adopted for last year from this report be also submitted to the Department of Planning for their consideration.
Thank you. David Tierney.
Just before I start on procedure, this has been, I'm the project director, as you know, is that I thought on the council things I could get a little bit of an extension because this is a major project and I'd like to go for about 5.5 minutes.
Well, you have also had Sean speak on behalf of your project, David, so I would ask you to try to stick to 3, otherwise I will get well, you will get 4, so just... Try.
4 years, 4 minutes, it seems fair.
Yeah, well, others will prevent a countervailing view, but just if you could try to stick to 4 would be fantastic.
That's going to be hard. Thank you anyway. Well, as I said to the others, I'm the project director for the Victoria Road Precinct project. I am neither the originator nor the custodian of this vital renewal project. I speak on behalf of the many owners, landowners and businesses and residents who have worked and lived in Marrickville for decades. Many of them are here tonight, and I think they'd like an extension of time. So those people, they've seen their area decline, knowing that their community could be better. The Administrator, you've made a virtue since your appointment by saying your role in this job is to carry on the good work of the previous councils and to respect the wishes of the community, not radically change direction. You'll back that virtue up on a number of fronts, including WestConnex. Well, the rejuvenation of this precinct has long been a part of the old Marrickville Council's strategic land use thinking to revitalise the tied gateway to Marrickville. It was first approved by this council as having strategic merit in 2012 when the current LEP was adopted. So it is not new. It's not radical. It's been planned in a systematic and considered manner over many years. There's a comment in this report that no study supports the proposal. I guess if you repeat a lie often enough, some people might believe it. If you look at the volumes of the details in the studies that Council have done and the Planning Department have supported the strategic merit for a very long time. Why? Because it meets all the state and council planning policies, creating new dwellings, creating affordable housing, creating employment opportunities. It's an environmentally sustainable development. That's why it's supported and determined by the Greater Sydney Commission, not just planning, by the Commission. And all of that won't happen if the council officer's report remains unamended. And in the last 2 days, the new Sydenham to Bankstown Urban Renewal Corridor Strategy was released. It supports the Victoria Road Precinct Strategy. To quote from the Key Actions section, the strategy says, permit a mix of residential employment and industrial uses in the Victoria Road and Mary Street precincts. It also proposes a new entrance to the northern end of Sydenham Station. That will mean that all of the proposed dwellings under our proposal will be within 800 metres of the new metro line, a transport-oriented development supported by state policy. And the project has the support of the community. 68% of the individual public submissions support the project, many of them local businesses who've seen their customers dry up. That's unusual for here. And why? Because we've consulted and we've adopted the strategies of both council and the community. For instance, over 90% of the precinct will remain zoned for employment uses. It's actually 95% of private lands that will be zoned for employment, some with new business zonings, particularly on the large number of vacant and underutilised lots. 95% retention. That is precautionary approach to rezoning employment lands. It is an employment generating project. And since the unendorsed employment strategy with this council's report is based on, in 2004, the MELS said that this should stay all industrial, thus giving all industries a big green light to come to the area, but not one new building, not one new industrial use since 2004 has set up in this precinct. Check your DAs, nothing. So it seems as though the report is saying that someday, somewhere over the rainbow, industries are going to arrive. Meanwhile, jobs are lost. It's actually irresponsible. The last thing I was going to say is they've opposed the redevelopment. I'm going to have to cut it short, aren't I? The redevelopment around residential around Wicks Park. What the report doesn't say is that every council report, both the Architectural Excellence Panel and the Design Panel, recommended residential around the Wicks Park, mainly because it was close to the station. It provided surveillance on the park. There's been also some other matters, if I'm allowed, just to say there's been, and seen tonight, that there is complete scaremongering and misreporting about what's going to happen to Wicks Park and land acquisitions. That is not going to happen. Wicks Park is a key part of this proposal. We don't support it, neither do the real reports, and we'll enhance it. Can I just say at the end that I hope you continue the work of the previous councils in supporting this planning proposal, and hopefully that you can resolve that tonight, because the hard-working people behind me, the real soul of Marrickville, want to get on with doing what they've been doing for decades, making Marrickville industrious, making Marrickville creative and interesting, and making Marrickville a great place to live. I commend them.
Okay, I've got some more speakers. George Buteris. George here.
I had the pleasure of being in Marrickville in the 70s and 80s. And further, I had the pleasure of running a real estate office for 15 years. I have seen Marrickville where it was and where it is. And what this proposal offers is choice. It allows people to have a choice of continuing to live in Marrickville. Unless something like this proposal gets up, what will happen, as what's happened, is that if you look at the figures, in January 2013, the median average property sale was $772,000. In January 2017, it was $1,340,000, almost double. History has shown us that in 5 to 7 years, every 5 to 7 years, properties double. What that'll do is that nobody, very few people, will be able to afford to live in Marrickville unless the council sees fit to allow developments like this, Carrington Road, Victoria Precinct, to allow people to have a choice now for this present generation and for future generations. They'll have a choice of being able to buy or rent, which will become more difficult because to be able to put a site like this together, to be able to designate a precinct like this will only become almost totally out of reach. We've got to take, for example, in making those choices, this government has made the choice, and God bless them, because I have seen the inadequacies of previous governments in not making the choices of the infrastructures that is being planned now for all over Sydney. That will give people the choices to be able to live.
Extra minute, George.
Yes, please. That will give people the choices to be able to live where they want by being able to get on those expressways. You, the council, this council, has the opportunity, and may I say, you have the obligation, the duty, to look at developments like this so that present and future generations of people are going to be able to continue to live in Marrickville. And let me say also that you're concerned about the industrial, offering industrial and continued employment. There's a development in McAvoy Street in Alexandria, a multi-storey building that was converted to industrial uses. They put in a goods lift and it allowed small, creative, innovative industrial uses in that building.
Which I need you to finish up because there are others wanting to speak. Thanks.
Thank you. And therefore, I suggest that the Marrickville Council looks at all of those industrial properties outside the precinct, the Victoria Precinct, to allow 3, 4 and 5-storey industrial uses, which will create a Marrickville technology hub. Thank you.
James Gilronan.
Good evening. The Victoria Road Precinct proposal stands to be one of the most forward-thinking projects in our region. I dare say it stands alongside with the Sydenham Creative Hub concept in providing opportunities for the future forward-thinking growth of our region. But the Victoria Road Precinct proposal comes in two forms. There is the largely less controversial aspect of increasing the number of land uses in the area. And then there is the much more controversial aspect, which should probably better be called the Mitchell Road Precinct proposal, which is a huge residential development. Now, of course, this residential aspect provides a lot of the energy for the proposal and is where a lot of the value that is going to be gained is going to come from. Now, I can't speak for other people, but I think it's very reasonable to presume that the proponents that are referred to many times in many documents are not so concerned about the many controversial aspects of this project as much as they're concerned about the uplift. The value uplift of this project is potentially huge and will contribute a lot to the increase of wealth in our area. But it's not just the proponents that should be caring about this uplift. It's you, the Inner West Council, along with the community. Because our council has a very large shortfall of funds. We have a lot of projects to fund and we don't have much money. Now, I remember reading in the affordable housing documents that were released earlier this year that value uplift capture represents one of the main mechanisms by which our council can fund many of the needed upgrades in our community. And so I would suggest that perhaps the large uplift of this project is in the greatest interest not just of the proponents who stand to gain a lot from the property value increase, but from the whole community if this uplift is managed appropriately. And with the recommendations that are listed here, it seems that rather than working with the proponents to find a solution that benefits the whole community, the council is butting heads and shaking away the responsibility of helping to make this work for everyone. Now, it's strange that that this project has gone on for so long, been pushed back, changes have been made. I think we should probably get closer to a solution. I'd like a bit more time. Solution that works for everyone, and perhaps maybe we should shrink down the number of items that we put towards the Minister for Planning. Now, the proposal is controversial for a number of reasons. Some of them probably are good. For example, objections from the Roads and Maritime Service. Maybe we should make sure that we don't clog up the roads unnecessarily. Making sure that the proposal adequately deals with infrastructure planning, funding and delivery. That seems pretty sensible. Making sure the proposal reflects urban design and built form, makes a lot of sense. Affordable housing is important too. It's not clear why an increase from 3 to 5% should be that much of an issue, but it'll bring even greater benefits to our area. Perhaps a change in the language could help achieve a better result in a faster amount of time, and it would be better for everyone in the community. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Mark Drury.
Thank you, Administrator. I would just like to draw your attention back to the consideration of this matter given by the local representative advisory committee, i.e. the sacked mayors and councillors. We considered this matter a couple of weeks ago, and our suggestion was that council forward the revised planning proposal to the department along with the council officer's reports outlining the concerns and the community engagement strategy. Secondly, we recommended that council advocates that the affordable housing in the project should be at the 15%. additionally, I think this proposal still has some whiskers on it. It needs work. But this is not a DA. This is just the first step in a pretty long planning process, which will continue. I think that it is in everyone's interest to keep this process continuing along, to actually address those issues, have the proponents address those issues through the planning process of the department, because I think there is a real need to deal with the eyesore that's down there in a way that is sympathetic to the objections, and even in the community engagement report, there are some substantive objections. In what the council officers say, there are some substantive objections. But it seems to me the Inner West Council and Marrickville Council has flapped around with this for far too long. I reckon bundle it all off to the department with the report, the engagement report that we were asked for, and the revised plan that's come from the proponents, and let them try and sort it.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on this item? I'm going to Victor Macri.
Chair, I think it's important that as a former councillor, I explain why the council, elected staff, elected representative have always supported this project. And it's basically due to the vision. And when you've grown up in the area, as many speakers have spoken about, it is an area that is more than a little dysfunctional and creates a lot of work for our monitoring services staff. That's the real difficulty, because we're trying to get a square peg into a round hole. We're trying to get different types of industry uses into buildings that can't accommodate them. And what we're getting here now with this revised proposal is an increase in the actual employment of the area, which is a very positive outcome. When we talk about employment and the character, people talk about losing the character of Marrickville. Well, I see the actual old character of Marrickville in this application, because it's about bringing people closer to where they work. Marrickville was founded on people coming here, the migrants. The first stop was Marrickville because they worked near the factories, and the factories were all in the Marrickville-Sydenham area. They had no cars, so they had to walk to work. And this is going back to the future, where people will be able to live close to work. The jobs that the people who can now afford to live in Marrickville are not blue-collar workers. They're creative industry people, they're technicians, they're computer people, they're working on different things. And these buildings don't adequately address the needs of those types of industries, as they do not address the current needs of the industries that are trying to work in those places now. No loading facilities, no access to heavy vehicles, trying to squeeze big vehicles up small lanes. So when we talk about the vision for the area, it's really important. And the council has had that vision for Marrickville to actually get a gateway. When you leave Enmore, you leave a nice area, you come around the corner, and you're horrified. You don't know where you are anymore. It is cold, barren and desolate. That is the only words I can use to describe that stretch of Victoria Road. There isn't any soft landscaping. The trees are even dead there. Nothing grows there. I mean, it's really something from another planet almost. And I'm not being disrespectful to the people that are down there. It's just a product of trucks running up on footpaths because there's nowhere to unload. There's not enough parking to address the issues that they have down there. On the intersection, I'm quite puzzled with some of the stuff the RMS does, but the RMS, well, they're always trying to pass their problems on to someone else. The Metro up the road has over 2,000 parking spots, over 2,000, which turn over probably 15 to 20 times a day. I don't think they had...
Extra minute, Victor?
Yeah, I'll need it. I don't think they had any issue with the intersection down there.
I just think we have to really look at that. And you know what? If you want to look at the sorriest park, and I'll say in the whole new Inner West Council, it's Wicks Park. A park for who? A park for no one. In the middle of the industrial land there, it does nothing. Here you have an opportunity now with VPA money to actually revitalise Wicks Park and make it an actual centrepiece that the community can actually use. As a kid, the only thing that got me down there was that merry-go-round thing until they banned them and people were falling off and breaking their legs. And then there was nothing there. So as a resident, I never went there as a kid. I went to the other parks. It's imperative that this stuff is done right and done properly, and we have a different view from the staff on this. I'm not asking you to change the report. If you think you should, it's up to you, but I don't think you can. I think you need to just progress this matter up to the department. It's been there before with the same sort of recommendations, and they've progressed it to Gateway, and I believe they deal with it. And they're probably better suited to deal with the RMS anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Any other speakers on this? Yes, Rosanna.
I'll try to be very brief on this. We did meet at LRAC recently, and I agree with former Councillor Drury that we ought to progress this matter and to send it forward to the department as soon as possible. It's been battered around for quite some time. It's very common to receive reports from staff that sometimes contain errors, that sometimes contain misconceptions, for example. In the past, we very often used to go out with the DAC to actually view properties, whether they were mum and dad renovations or whether they were new developments with property developers. We would go out and have a look, and in discussion with the residents and also with applicants and proponents, we often found ways to get around things. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's available for this type of development, which is quite different, but we have actually had community consultation. We've had 2 of them, and I think that the time has come to progress this. Further to that, we were asked our opinion and for advice from the LRAC, and we have actually given our recommendation, and I suggest that that be put forward to the department. Thank you.
Yes, Horst. Yes.
No, I just want to say that I was from in 2008 or so when we approved it, I was a councillor in this time. I started in Marrickville Road in 1975 as a menswear. All Victoria Road and around this area, it used to be suit manufactory, shirt manufactory, trouser manufactory, famous Caradona shoes. All this was around this area. It was fantastic. You go now and what you can find. I don't want to dope anyone or nothing. I say something now, I shouldn't say it. It's run as illegal boarding houses. And that's what is there. Another thing I want to say, George said it's a real estate. When I approve it, I said, we want to approve it because I don't want to see Marrickville will be like Paddington. The average price was how much and what's the average price here? I got a lot of residents, they come and tell me, we want our kids to live in the area. They're getting married, but they cannot afford to live in the area. Is that what we want Marrickville? Marrickville all the time is happy place, and this project, I think, will bring back how Marrickville was. It was going to have some manufacturing, some unit. That's what we want Marrickville. We, as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, we have a meeting last week with Sydenham to Bankstown, the metro from Sydenham to Bankstown, and they give us the news. From Marrickville to Martin Place is going to be 12 minutes. From Sydenham to Martin Place is going to be 8 to 10 minutes. People can live, work in the city, and they still can walk to Sydenham Station, and they can be in the city in 8 minutes. And that's why I think that's a fantastic project. It should go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, final call for speakers on this item. Okay, good. I'm going to ask Simon Minosky, the Group Manager, to make some responses.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. This application has been with Council for a number of years now. We acknowledge the importance of the area and the need for renewal. Acknowledge it's also a complex planning proposal and it will fundamentally change the area. Yes, we need to take a precautionary approach, undoubtedly, and that's to look at the long-term nature of this area, or this precinct, I should say. And in preparing this recommendation, as an officer recommendation, we're trying to achieve a balanced outcome for this precinct at this point in time. One of the speakers tonight very eloquently put it around choice for mixed uses, creative uses, and areas for arts and cultural activities, support for nighttime activities, offices, ancillary uses, and of course living, residential uses. One of the other speakers that was also mentioned tonight, smash repairers. In trying to achieve a balanced outcome, we're trying to achieve all those uses I've just mentioned, plus some areas to be retained for industrial at this point in time. What's lost, I think, in the discussion this evening to a degree is the recommendation in front of the Administrator this evening, in front of Council, is to not support the planning proposal as submitted. We're happy to see part of that planning proposal go through, subject to a number of conditions going to the department. I must point out also on the residential side, of the 1,100 units that are being proposed, the area which we're saying west of Victoria Road at this point contains around 800 dwellings in itself. So 800 of the 1,100 dwellings, we're saying, look, we're happy to consider going through as a mixed use. It's not a lie. We've said in the report itself, we're happy to do through a site-specific clause to support mixed uses in this area. We've allowed for mixed use along, again, retail or mixed use, including residential along Sydenham and Victoria Road, mixed uses behind that, residential to the west of Far Street, and a more traditional business area in the northern part on the western side of Victoria Road. I think I just needed to point out, we're not saying throw out this planning proposal. We don't agree with it whatsoever. We're not. We're saying the recommendation clearly says do not support it in its current form. There are a number of fundamental issues that we can't resolve through this planning proposal in supporting it. One of those things is a clear objection from the RMS. And unfortunately, the report that's been provided to us does identify acquisition of properties. If there's new information, I'm sure that will be looked at in due course. Part of that acquisition includes, is identified along Wicks Park. This is to provide additional turning, a right turn from Sydenham turning into Victoria Road. The problem we have with Wicks Park is it's classified for community purposes. To do anything with Wicks Park, to do any changes, acquisition, requires a reclassification to operational uses. To do that, you need approval from the Minister for Planning and the Governor of New South Wales. We don't have that at the moment. We've gone through the other key issue we've also mentioned in the report, apart from the acquisition and Wicks Park, is also there are a number of other issues we need to sort out in terms of flooding. The quantum of affordable housing, I know, was raised earlier this evening. Council's clear policy on that is 15% for affordable housing. The other issue that we also need to determine is upfront funding or a mechanism of funding for the infrastructure that will be required to support the additional 1,100 units and workers and visitors to this area. Those issues haven't been resolved just yet. So the recommendation, as is before council, is not support the planning proposal as submitted to council in its current form, but if the minister or the commission's of the view to support it, there's a number of conditions we've asked for them to consider in allowing that planning proposal to go forward. The area which we haven't supported going forward, which is to the east of Victoria Road, we've said we're happy to relook at that area once the Sydenham to Bankstown strategy has come out. That strategy only came out yesterday, on Sunday. So again, should the planning proposal be forwarded to the department, we're happy to look at that with the department as well.
Thank you, Mr. Minosky. Thank you, everyone, for speaking on this matter. I think the officers have done a thorough job on this, but I don't support the recommendation as fully put to council. What I'm going to do, and this is, I believe, respecting the view that was put at LRAC, is, and if we can put it on the screen. So there's a single recommendation now, which says council forwards the Victoria Road planning proposal to the Minister for Planning, indicating its support for the proposal subject to. And then the subject to are the 10 items with some slight amendments as contained in the officer's report under Part B, which includes the affordable housing contribution being in accordance with council's affordable housing policy, which is 15%, and a range of other matters, including resolving the issue with RMS. So there are some things in these 10 items where I suspect there can be some movement from the developer to provide some additional benefits. I'm told the reduction in residential yield will be from about 1,100 to of the order of 800 or so. So it's not, I beg your pardon? Can you just, like, this is a council meeting, and just if you could behave accordingly would be fantastic. So this is the recommendation that I'm going to adopt. It will require some further discussion, I'm sure, between council, the department and the proponent. The alternative I have is to defer this for further consideration by council. I don't think that's in anyone's interest. So this is a recommendation that I'm going to adopt. Council, the department and the developer and the proponent need to work through these issues. The department may come to a different conclusion on some of these issues. But I think it's time to put the ball in their court. I think it's been in council for too long, and I think it's now an opportunity to move forward and to try to find a solution in this final phase of consideration of this planning proposal. So with those, we will also send the consultation report with this letter to the Department of Planning, and this moves it on in the process, and hopefully we get to an outcome. I actually was down there today, had a look around. It actually needs renewal. It's not flash. So I do agree with much of those sentiments, but we need to find a way through. Okay, hopefully this is the start of the end. So with those comments, I adopt that recommendation, and I'm going to thank everyone for their participation. And I'm going to take a short 5-minute break, if that's okay, and we'll resume at about 10 to 9.
That's right.
restart the meeting in order that we can conclude the business. General Manager, Rick, let's go, guys. If everyone could resume their seats. Wal, could you ask these people here to resume their seats? Security, could you just ask people to take their seat? That would be really helpful in a very non-aggressive manner, please. So we would like to restart the meeting, everybody. Hall and John, if you could join us. Yep. So we have a fair few items left, but I don't have speakers for a number of items. So what I'm going to do is just run through the items that I don't have speakers for currently. And you can tell me whether or not you want to speak on them. So item 6, Parramatta Road Transformation Strategy Council Action Plan. Does anybody want to speak on that item? It's good. No? Keep it going. No. So that's 6. So I adopt the recommendations in that report. Item 7, the council submission on SEPP 64. No speakers, so adopt the recommendation. Item 8, planning proposal first. Oh no, we have got a speaker on that, so I'll come back to 8. Item 9, Haberfield Heritage Conservation Area. This is Lucille wants to speak on it, so I'll come back to you on that, Lucille. Item 10, Princess Highway St Peters planning proposal. No speakers on that. I'll adopt the recommendation. Item 11, we have speakers. Item 12, we have speakers. Item 13.
Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, Administrator, where are you up to?
13.
Good.
13, no speakers on 13. I adopt the recommendation. Item 14, no, I want to add something on 14. Item 15, naming of new lane in St Peters. No speakers. Adopt the recommendation. Item 16, review of the Fanny Durack extended trial. No speakers. Adopt the recommendation. Item 17, the draft community engagement framework, results of public exhibition. No speakers. Adopt the recommendation. Item 18, we have got speakers. Item 19, we got speakers. Item 20, councillor remuneration, 2718. No speakers. Adopt the recommendation. Item 21, draft councillor expenses and facilities policy to go on public exhibition. No speakers. Adopt that. And item 22, we've got speakers. So we have left, if I'm correct, and I need to be double checked on this, item 8, 9, 14, 18, 19 and 22. Can we just make sure that those are the items remaining to be determined? I'm going to go to item 8, which is the planning proposal for 55 to 63 Smith Street, Summerhill. I've got Angela Batley, if Angela's here. And if she's not, she's not. And I've got Mark Drury. This is the Smith Street planning proposal, Summerhill. You put your name down, but it might be an error. Yeah.
Change his mind. I've changed my mind.
Change your mind? Okay, and I'm happy to adopt the recommendations in that report. So 9 is the Haberfield Conservation Area, Lucille.
I'm not changing my mind, but I'll be very brief, extremely brief. I think it was 2004, before I was elected to council, that the then Minister for Heritage Dr. Ashorgi said that he would have Haberfield listed on the State Heritage Register. That's a long time ago. And I'm really pleased, and I thank the officers for the work they're putting into this, and I just hope that at this time we might be able to get it across the line. Good luck with it. Thanks.
I appreciate those comments. Anybody else on Haberfield? So I'm happy to adopt those recommendations. Thank Lucille for those comments. Item 14, which is the fire safety reports. So I didn't actually have any speakers on this, but I did want to add an additional resolution to this. Brad, you've got that there.
Just while that's happening, Administrator, can I seek a clarification? Item 11 you've adopted, yeah?
Item 11 is no, because there was speakers on that. Yeah, that's a Peter RSL. Yeah, no, I haven't adopted that. Okay. Yeah. So you're right. That should be on the list. I'll come back to that. I really need to be double checked on this so we don't miss anything. So, if you can just put that as a new recommendation 3. So I think the officer report indicates that council's considering whether to undertake an audit of high-rise buildings. If you, Scott, is that publicly visible, Rad? 3, which I don't think we can actually wait on this. I definitely don't want anything like a Grenfell Tower disaster in the inner west. So we're going to proceed with a priority audit of all high-rise buildings and other high-risk premises in the LGA with external cladding to identify any buildings that have non-compliant cladding and recommended actions to rectify any if they are found. So we haven't got any evidence at this point that there are any, but I think we need to do this work as a high priority, and we're proceeding with that. With that additional recommendation, I'm adopting that. So that was 14. If we go back to 11, 11 being the Petersham RSL rezoning, and I have got Mark Drury and Dan Fitzgerald. So, Mark, did you want to talk on this is the item 11, the Petersham RSL rezoning.
I'll simply congratulate the officers on the work to date and look forward to this progressing through. It'll come as a surprise to no one that I have a great interest in the affordable housing component.
Thank you. Dan Fitzgerald? Okay, Dan. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Rad, there's an additional... So I just wanted to add a specific recommendation here, picking up Mark's point about affordable housing. Because I appreciate this rezoning's been in the pipeline for some time, so it predates council's affordable housing policy, but there is significant residential development proposed here. So I just want to add a point, and you add it under, it becomes new 1.3. So as long as we haven't lost any of the other bits, which I don't think we have. So all that's saying is that we do need to consider a specific affordable housing contribution using council's policy as a guide, because it's not a statutory document in this case because it predated the policy. But I do want to make it explicit that we will be expecting and seeking to work with the proponent on an affordable housing contribution for this development, and we'll have further discussions. But adding that in, I adopt those recommendations. That's 11. 12, which is the traffic committee. I think Mark Drury again on the list. Okay. Okay, so adopt the recommendation for 12. Leaves 18, 19 and 22. 18 being draft mobile food vending policy, and I have Chris Woods, who doesn't appear to be here. I've got Mark, I've got James Gilronan, and I think, John, were you putting your hand up? Okay, well, we have 20. On 18? Yep. So the only person registered to speak on 18 is James Gilronan. Just before you speak, James, John, what did you say you wanted to speak on? I called for speakers on that. There were none, and I adopted the recommendation. So I can't undo that, sorry. 18, food vending policy draft. James, over to you.
Hi, it's a great idea, and it's going to encourage entrepreneurialism and all kinds of new things, new culture. It's a good thing. But the food vans are not going to be in town centres. They're going to be in parks and at construction sites and other unusual, maybe unexpected places. One thing we have a lack of in some of those places are public toilets. So the idea of bringing more food to some places, such as Camperdown Memorial Rest Park, where there's still no public toilet, seems like maybe the policy could include something to do with coupling the food trucks with the availability of public toilets. I just couldn't see that in the policy, and I thought it was pretty important. Maybe it'll help to encourage a bit more of a conversation on the inclusion of more public toilets as we start to activate some of these other spaces. That was all I wanted to say.
There's no other speakers on item 18, draft mobile food vending policy, and it is going on exhibition for comment, so James and others will certainly be able to make a submission on that, but I might ask Simon Minoski, Group Manager, for any comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Reddit. We're happy to consider that. Look, it is going on exhibition, and that's one of the issues we're happy to take on board as part of that process.
So I'll adopt those recommendations, and that will go on public exhibition in the very near future. Item 19, Internal Ombudsman, Mark Drury.
Administrator, I like the idea of council being as open as it possibly can and having robust processes for review in a kind of systematic way and some capacity to actually keep an eye on this. When this matter was raised with the LRAC, I asked whether it was possible to understand the nature of the objection of the New South Wales Ombudsman to this proposition, which I don't know whether it's just a patch war thing, could be, but I would have thought that would have been an important thing to know prior to setting up our own ombudsman. because presently, you know, basically we're glorified bits of the state government. You know, they can sack us at whim. They can do basically what they like to us. And I don't know whether the jurisdiction of the New South Wales Ombudsman, where that starts and finishes. I'm just interested in that kind of question, and I hope you are too. I'd suggest that this matter be deferred until we can get a proper understanding of that.
Thanks. Anyone else on this item? I'm going to ask John, and if you can address the specific issue that Mark's raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pearson. So this is an issue that goes back over many years, as the internal ombudsman concept has been in operation in councils for about 15 years. The consultant that we're using to actually begin this process of setting up the Office of the Ombudsman is actually a person by the name of Kathy Roach, who was in fact the first ombudsman at Sutherland Council. And Kathy actually raised this issue through several years of her tenure at the Sutherland Council, and received correspondence from the New South Wales Ombudsman essentially along the lines of one issue, and the issue was actually confusion over the name. They didn't like the fact that another institution had the name of Ombudsman. They could possibly support it if it was called something else, and that pretty much was it. The Warringah Council, who also had an ombudsman, also contacted the New South Wales Ombudsman with us, once again seeking support from the New South Wales Ombudsman, and they provided similar correspondence suggesting that they had a real problem with the name of Ombudsman, as it might be confused in some way with the New South Wales Ombudsman. In terms of jurisdiction, the New South Wales Ombudsman is very clear. It's set in the legislation, and this concept of an internal ombudsman for local government in no way impinges on the jurisdiction of the New South Wales Ombudsman, and it continues to fulfil its role. The issue for the New South Wales Ombudsman is one of capacity. It has 2 investigators for the entire local government sector in New South Wales. And that sector is worth roughly $12 billion. And it simply does not have the capacity. And as Kath Roach has been aware, and as I've been aware, the New South Wales Ombudsman almost always will refer a matter to a council that has an ombudsman, because they have the capacity to actually conduct an investigation. The New South Wales Ombudsman has virtually no capacity to investigate in local government. In fact, what they tend to do is to conduct some telephone inquiries and review documents, because that's pretty much all they can do. So that's the issue then becomes whether they take something further, and for the most part, where there's an ombudsman for a local government entity, the New South Wales Ombudsman will use that work and actually comment on that as the appropriate investigation method.
Maybe we could call it the internal ombudsperson, being in a West and being gendered.
Well, it has been suggested.
And it's a different name.
It's also been overruled.
Maybe they might loosen up a little.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm comfortable with that explanation from Mr. Warburton, so I'm happy to proceed with these recommendations. But we may have some further discussions with the New South Wales Ombudsman just to make sure, or even to contemplate a different name if that be it. But I think the principle of ombuds something is important, because people kind of know what that means. So we'll have some further thoughts about that.
Call it ombudsman son-in-law. You can always divorce it.
Anyway, look, we might have some further. We're approving in principle the establishment. I'm approving in principle the establishment. We will have some further discussions through the way on this, but I think their concerns sound towards the trivial end of the spectrum to me. So I'm happy to proceed on that basis. I think it's an important governance initiative. So thanks for that. Thanks for raising that issue. We have one final item, which is item 22, Inner West Council Investments, and I've got Frank Breen speaking on this item.
Thank you, and I'm sure you can guess the point that I'm raising, and that is that I noticed that the non-fossil fuel lending ADIs has dropped from 54% in the previous month to 51% in the current month. I note the comment that it's the ratio has changed because there's been an inflow of cash at the end of the financial year being rates, and that's been put on deposit with the Commonwealth Bank, which is not a fossil fuel-free lending institution. And I appreciate that that may be only short term and that the ratio may change. But what also attracts my attention is the fact that the absolute figure for the non-fossil fuel lending ADIs has decreased. It's gone back from 109,700,000 to 108,200,000, a drop of 1.5 million. Now, my understanding is that as investments reach maturity, they would be rolled over. And this suggests that some of the fossil fuel-free investments haven't been rolled over into further non-fossil fuel lending ADIs. So I'd like an explanation of why it's gone backwards, the actual amount, and also with our target of 70% by middle of next year, 30th of June 2018, are we going to be able to achieve that? Because this seems to be going in the wrong direction, both as on a ratio basis and on an absolute basis. So if perhaps I could seek some clarification and assurances. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I'm going to hand over to Michael Zamoulis.
Through the Administrator, yeah, I'm very confident about achieving the 70% by June 2018. Having spoken with Prudential, our advisors, they're very comfortable that we'll get to that point. We have had a drop. I can assure you that every maturity that's come up has gone back into a fossil fuel investment. What has actually happened, we have, and you would have seen from our third quarter budget review, the last quarter of the financial year always has a high amount of accounts payable. So there's a bulk of projects that get finished up in the May, June period. And you'll see the same thing probably happen in June as well, where we have a large amount of monies that are paid out because we've got the invoices coming in and we're closing the financial year. So you'll see some of our investment not roll over so that we can afford to pay the vendors that come in. And then once we determine how much is left over, we'll put that all back into a non-fossil or fossil fuel-free investment portfolio. Does that answer the question?
So that would reflect in August or something?
We'll see that around August, yeah, where we can turn it around. The key thing is June. We're trying to close off all the balances that come through and the invoices that we're getting paid. We have a huge month in June, which is probably about 2 or 3 times the size of a normal month because we're closing off the financial year.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No other speakers on that item. I think that concludes the council meeting. I thank everyone for attending and well, I resolved that I receive and note that report. So I formally do that. Thank you everybody for attending and see you all in July.
Yes, I've made it very clear to everyone. It gives us a lot of the ADIs have gone there. With the exception of the copper plan, a lot of the other operations. It's just I can tell you on everything that's come on maturity. I've actually been personally involved in